Number 1. Nanjing University Ripper Case. January 19, 1986. An elderly poor woman was picking garbage near Nanjing University. She found a large black plastic bag which contained a pile of well-cooked meat chops. She gladly brought it home and started to cook. When she dumped all the contents on the table, 3 pieces of strange meat caught her attention. When looked closer, they looked like severed human fingers. She immediately notified the police. In fact, at the time, police had already been alerted of 4 other black plastic bags found in the vicinity of Nanjing University. All of them contained cooked meat, and one with a half-boiled human head. The one brought home by the woman was the last one missing. Police quickly established that it was a human victim's dismembered body. Police went on to count the pieces of meat. There were more than 2,000, and the bones, heart, liver, and spleen were missing. At the time, DNA forensic was still unavailable. Police used the victim's clothing, which was left together with meat in one bag, to identify the victim. A group of college girls identified that it was their roommate's clothes. Her name was Tiawei King, a very introvert and quiet girl. She was from a poor village and had been studying in Nanjing University for only half a year. Police checked her diaries. There was no strange encounters and no quarrels recorded. She lived a relatively normal school life. She was last seen leaving university after lessons in the evening at about 6 p.m. She had been missing for 9 days since 10th January until her discovery on 19th. Nobody knew where she had been during this time. Police followed many leads, searched every corner in Nanjing City, conducted over 10,000 suspect interviews, but nothing has turned up. The case remains unsolved. Number 2. Thallium Poisoning. In 1984, Zhu Ling was a sophomore at Tsinghua University in Beijing. Classmates described her as attractive, intelligent, and talented with an interest in music. At the end of 1984, she began to show strange and debilitating symptoms when she reported experiencing acute stomach pain along with extensive hair loss. Following her hospitalization at Tongren Hospital, her condition gradually improved and she was allowed to return to school. The following March, however, her old symptoms returned worse than before. This time accompanied by pain in her legs, loss of muscular eye control, and partial facial paralysis. Unable to breathe on her own, she was placed on respirator. One physician at Peking Union Medical College Hospital reported having diagnosed a similar poisoning case in 1960s and strongly suspected that Zhu Ling's symptoms were caused by thallium poisoning. However, Zhu Ling denied that she had any contact with thallium in class, a claim which was confirmed by her university's chemistry department. As a result, her doctors ruled out thallium poisoning as a potential cause. Instead, she was diagnosed with and treated for Guillain-Barré syndrome. However, her condition deteriorated rapidly. Desperate for help, 2 of Zhu's friends decided to turn to internet, which was still in its infancy in China at the time. They shared Zhu's story on several news groups, providing a detailed description of her symptoms. They wound up receiving thousands of responses, many from people who believed that Zhu had been poisoned by a toxic heavy metal known as thallium, the common antidote for which is known as Prussian blue. Subsequent tests confirmed that Zhu Ling had extraordinarily high levels of thallium in her body, about 10,000 times more than normal people. Doctors were able to administer the antidote Prussian blue in time to save her life, but she sustained serious permanent neurological damage. While she has recovered the ability to breathe on her own, she still cannot speak and remains largely paralyzed and almost blind, with severely reduced mental function. In addition, she has contracted hepatitis C from a tainted blood transfusion. The police began investigating the case in May 1995. It was not until January 2006 that police finally revealed to the media that their initial investigation had yielded a possible suspect. The prime suspect was Soon Wai, who was Zhu's roommate at the university and who happened to be one of the only students with access to thallium. However, some of Soon Wei's family members are powerful Communist Party officials who allegedly used their influence to hamper the investigation. In 2013, an online White House petition was created on May 3, 2013, demanding investigation on the major suspect who was believed to be living in US at the time. The petition garnered over 143,000 signatures, which demanded intervention in the case. However, on July 28, 2015, the White House declined to comment on the petition, and the poisoning remains unsolved. Number 3. Murder of Pamela Werner. On the morning of 8th January 1937, the severely mutilated body of Pamela Werner was found near the Fox Tower in Beijing, just outside the city's legation quarter. Pamela was the adopted daughter of Edward Werner, who was a scholar and the former British consul in Peking. She was keen on ice skating, listening to music, spoke fluent Mandarin, and was a bit of a loner. On the last day of her life, Pamela went to a dental appointment in the morning and then returned home to write letters. She left the family home in the late afternoon. Ho Ying, a servant who typically went out to purchase food around 3 p.m. daily, informed her at the time that he was doing so and asked her if she wanted him to buy sweetmeats when he did so. She declined, saying she herself would be leaving within the hour, although she indicated she would return by 7:30 p.m. for dinner, asking Ho to prepare meatballs and rice. When he returned, she was already gone. The family's gatekeeper had seen her leave with her bicycle. She visited friends and went to ice skating at the French embassy with them. Around 7:30 p.m., her friends recalled that Pamela said she had to go to home for dinner. They asked her if she felt comfortable returning home alone at night. She told them that she always went by herself and that nothing can happen to her in Peking. This would be the last time anyone would see her alive. By 8 p.m., Pamela had still not returned home, although her father had. Her father went looking for her. Shortly after 8 a.m. the next morning, 2 rickshaw drivers near the Fox Tower along the city's old walls noticed a group of wild dogs showing interest in a bundle lying in the ditch near the wall. An elderly man saw this too and went down to take a closer look. He found a mutilated body of what appeared to be a young European woman. He ran to the nearest police station. An autopsy concluded that the probable cause of death was a blow to the head with a blunt instrument. Within the body, muscles had been severed cleanly. Through 2 slits in the abdomen, most of Pamela's internal organs had been removed, and her blood drained. The skill required to do this as cleanly and quickly as it had been done suggested to the pathologist that whoever had done it had a considerable skill, perhaps that of a surgeon or anatomist. Her heart was also missing, with the ribs surrounding broken from inside to do so, a task requiring a considerable amount of force. A knife had also been used to repeatedly penetrate her vagina, to the point that it could not be determined whether Pamela had been sexually assaulted either before or after she was killed. One of the few internal organs remained was Pamela's stomach. It was found to contain some partially digested Chinese food. Since she had not been known to have eaten anything other than bread, cake, and tea that she had at her friend's house, this, along with the time her watch stopped, suggested that she had been alive for several hours after leaving the ice rink. The time of death was placed between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. It was concluded that the killing had been sexually motivated. The Peking police investigated in the Badlands and the rest of Peking, while British legation police had jurisdiction in the legation quarter. Pamela and her father lived just outside the legation quarter in Armour Factory Alley. The joint investigation between Chinese and British police was unusual and struggled to get much information from the community. The second Japanese invasion of China earlier in the year meant local police and colonial authorities had a lot to do. Pamela's father, unhappy with the progress, decided to investigate the case himself. He hired a private investigator and sent reports on his progress to the Metropolitan Police at Scotland Yard in London. Edward Werner was sure he knew who the suspect was, a prominent American dentist called Wentworth Prentice. He apparently knew Pamela from having done some dental work on her, and Werner thought that he invited her to a party, got her drunk, tried to sexually assault her, and then murdered her when she resisted. The theory is then that the mutilation was an attempt to make it look like an uncivilized local attacked her, and her body was dumped at the Fox Tower. After Japanese invasion, Werner and Prentice were put in the same internment camp. Unfortunately, perhaps due to Scotland Yard being too busy, nothing was done with the evidence. Edward Werner died in England in 1954 and never did find out who killed his daughter. Number 4. The Rape of Nanking. The year was 1937. China and Japan were at war, and hostilities had been raging for 6 months. Japan was about to execute the infamous Rape of Nanking, widely regarded as one of the most horrific massacres in military history. At that time, the Japanese pushed towards the heart of China. They began to march on Nanking, but the mighty Yangtze River stretched across their path. To reach Nanking, they would have to cross a narrow bridge. The Chinese commander, Colonel Li Fuxian, decided to fight at that bridge. If he could stop the Japanese there, he just might save his country. He had sent for 3,000 reinforcements, and they had arrived. The men were placed along a line some 2 miles long to defend the bridge. They were equipped with large amounts of heavy artillery and were quite prepared to fight to the last man if necessary. Having inspected his men, the colonel uttered some motivating words before returning to his headquarters back beyond the line to await the inevitable Japanese attack. When Colonel Lee awoke the following morning, he was told by his assistant that the soldiers at the defense line were not responding to calls or signals. Immediately, he formed and led an investigating party to find out what had happened with the troops. On arrival at the line, they were met with a chilling sight. Every position was deserted, not a single man to be found anywhere. The equipment remained. The heavy guns stood in position, ready to be fired, but there was no one to fire them. There was no sign of struggle or fighting. The only way across that river was over the bridge. Near to the bridge, they interrogated the remained sentries for information. They swore that not a single soldier had crossed the bridge during the night. None of them had seen or heard a thing. 1 or 2 soldiers might have slipped past them, but not nearly 3,000 soldiers. The missing men were never found. When the war finally ended, the Japanese records were examined for some clue as to what may have befallen the missing men. But the records showed no trace of the 3,000 missing troops. They were never seen again. Various theories have cropped up online to explain the disappearances, from the realistic, such as desertion and murder, to alien abduction, or that the troops retreated into a hollow subterranean layer of earth. Speculation is all that remains. Number 5. The Boy in the Red. Zizu Kwong was a 13-year-old boy who was studying at a local boarding school in a small town in Chongqing, China, while his parents, who were once peasants, were working in the north district of the city. Zizu Kwong was the only son in the family and usually met together every weekend. They had an old house in a village not far from the boys' school, but since no one lived there, it had been abandoned for a long time. The house had 3 doors, 1 front door, 1 side door, and 1 back door. The back door was very discreet and blocked by 2 wooden planks plus 1 rebar. If you were not familiar with the house, you wouldn't even notice that there was a back door. On October 25, 2009, before returning to school, the boy told his parents he was going to visit the old house next week. During the following week, his parents got no news from him and they started to get worried. On November 3rd, his father called him and no one answered. He contacted the school, but teachers told him that the boy had been absent from school for the whole week. The school's explanation was that due to the outbreak of influenza A, they had enough reasons to believe that the boy was ill at home. The parents were shocked and freaked out. The father immediately went to their old house as the boy had stated he would visit it. He found neither the front door nor the side door would open, but the back door was not closed. The 2 planks and rebar were taken off on the ground. Entering the house, he found the boy was hanging from the wooden beam with his hands and feet tied firmly. There was a huge weight tied around his feet. The boy was wearing a red dress and a woman's swimming suit, and there was a pinhole on the forehead. He also found 32 yuan in the boy's trouser pocket. The cell phone was still in his school bag. Nothing was missing. His father called the police. On December 3rd, the police released a report and said that the death was an accident. They told the father that his son was accidentally killed in some kind of a game involving superstition, which did not constitute a crime. They decided not to file the case. The father couldn't accept such an answer, so he applied for reconsideration on December 11th. He stated that the red dress once belonged to his niece, but had no idea whose swimsuit he was wearing. 2 crumpled black cloth was stuffed in the bra to form fake breasts. The boy was hanging from a wooden beam, but the rope was tied around his hands instead of his neck. The way of tying was very professional, with 12 loops on each hand and foot, something that a 13-year-old wouldn't be able to do on his own. However, 10 days later, the police told him after a thorough investigation there was no clue of murder or suicide. The autopsy showed the boy died of asphyxiation, and there was no trauma except the pinhole on the forehead and the marks of rain. They again ruled it an accidental death. The father believed that his wife's ex-husband was the killer. The boy's mother had married twice. He was the son of her second marriage. The mother had another child with her ex-husband. When they divorced, her ex-husband gained the custody of him. But that child disappeared many years ago. Her ex-husband firmly believed that she hid the child. 3 years ago, her ex-husband warned her if she would not hand over his child, he would take revenge. However, there was no evidence to prove this man to be the murderer. The case remains unsolved to this day.